Portsmouth, England, the early 1950s. A grey morning smelling of salt and diesel oil. A young Royal Navy engine room rating climbs down into a brand new fast patrol boat for his very first day aboard and stops dead in front of the machinery. It does not look like an engine. There are no cylinder heads, because it has none. There are 3 crankshafts, one at each corner. And the whole thing is a triangle. 18 cylinders and 36 pistons arranged in 3 flat banks, standing on one point like the Greek letter delta. When it lights off, the sound is like nothing else on Earth, a rising mechanical scream that men who heard it never forgot. Regular viewers of this channel already know this engine's grandfather. It is the same German opposed piston idea that ended up in American submarines, the family we have covered twice before. But the British took that idea somewhere the Germans themselves tried to go and gave up. They folded it into a triangle. And to make the triangle work at all, they had to do something that sounds like a mistake. They made one of the 3 crankshafts run backwards. This is the story of the Napier Deltic, the strangest great engine ever put into service, an engine that fought Britain's wars, hauled Britain's fastest trains, and then crossed the ocean to fight America's secret war in Vietnam. And it is the story of why building it as a triangle was not madness. It was the entire point. To understand why anyone would build such a thing, start with the problem, because the Deltic was not a stunt. It was the answer to a very specific and very bloody question. The Second World War had taught the Royal Navy a hard lesson about small fighting boats. Fast attack craft, torpedo boats, gunboats, needed enormous power in a tiny hull, and through the war that meant gasoline engines. Gasoline engines in combat are floating bombs. Crews burned. The Navy came out of the war wanting diesel power for its fast boats, because diesel fuel does not explode the way petrol vapor does. And there was a sting in the lesson, because the enemy had already solved it. The German fast attack boats had run big diesels all through the war, and British crews in their petrol boats had envied them every single night of it. But there was a catch, and it seemed unsolvable. A diesel with enough horsepower for a fast attack boat was, in 1946, a huge, heavy, slow-turning lump. Diesels made their power with mass, with iron, with great slow strokes, and a fast boat cannot carry mass. Put a proper marine diesel in a small hull and the boat is no longer fast. So navies had always held their noses and accepted the petrol. What the Admiralty asked for that year was close to a contradiction. A diesel with the power of a big marine engine and the weight of something far smaller. And most engine makers would have politely declined. The contract went to D. Napier and Son, an old aero engine house with a reputation for brilliant, complicated machinery, and Napier reached for a German idea it already owned. Before the war, Napier had licensed the Junkers opposed piston aircraft diesel, the same brilliant family we have talked about on this channel before. 2 pistons in every cylinder, no cylinder heads at all. The explosion trapped between 2 moving crowns. Napier's licensed version was called the Culverin, a flat aero diesel intended for long-range flying boats. And though the Culverin itself never amounted to much, it left Napier holding something priceless, a complete working education in opposed piston engineering. And here is the delicious part. Junkers themselves had already tried to multiply that engine into something bigger. They experimented with a triangle layout, could not get the pistons of the 3 banks to phase correctly with one another, abandoned it, and settled instead on a square balanced on one corner, 4 banks and 4 crankshafts, a 24-cylinder monster called the Jumo 223. Only 6 were ever built, and the design ended up in Soviet hands after the war. So the triangle was the layout the inventors of the whole concept had tried and walked away from. That is what Napier decided to build. 3 culverins joined into one closed figure. Why a triangle at all? Because it is the most compact shape 3 banks of opposed piston cylinders can make. Every side of the triangle is a bank of 6 cylinders. Every corner is a crankshaft, and every crankshaft is shared by the 2 banks that meet at its corner. So 3 crankshafts do the work that a conventional layout would need 6 crank throws of space for. No cylinder heads, no valves, uniflow scavenging through ports, a supercharged 2-stroke firing so often it sounds like it is tearing the air. 18 cylinders, 36 pistons, 88 liters, folded into a package light enough and short enough to drop into a torpedo boat. But the geometry hid the same trap that had beaten junkers. Trace the motion around the triangle and the piston phasing simply refuses to come out right. Exhaust ports must open before intake ports and close after them, all around a closed loop of 3 banks, and the arithmetic will not balance. Napier's engineers hit the identical wall until a senior draftsman offered the suggestion that fixed it: run one of the 3 crankshafts in the opposite direction to the other 2. Reverse one corner, and the whole triangle falls into rhythm. At each crankshaft, a forked connecting rod from one bank and a blade rod from its neighbor share the same crank, and phasing gears at the end of the engine gather the 3 shafts, one of them spinning backwards, into a single output. Inside each of those 18 cylinders, the arrangement is pure opposed piston gospel, the family trick this channel has covered before. 2 pistons share one cylinder, running toward each other, and the fuel is injected into the shrinking space between their crowns. So combustion happens between 2 moving pistons with no cylinder head to seal, no head gasket to fail, and no valves to float or burn. The exhaust piston leads its partner slightly, opening its ports early and closing them early. So fresh blown-in air sweeps the length of the cylinder in one direction only, which is what engineers mean by uniflow, and it is one of the cleanest ways ever devised to breathe a 2-stroke. The development was as methodical as the concept was wild. The Admiralty contract was signed in 1946. Napier proved the triangle first on a 3-cylinder test rig, 1 cylinder from each bank, and proved the scavenge blower on its own rig alongside it. Only then did the company commit to the full engine, and when the first complete 18-cylinder Deltic ran in April of 1950, followed by the prototype marine engines for the new patrol boats, the gamble had already been retired one careful step at a time, and the cadence of the thing beggars belief. In the 9-cylinder version, a cylinder fired every 40 degrees of crankshaft rotation, which means the full 18-cylinder engine fired every 20 degrees. A fresh explosion 9 times in every single revolution. No 4-stroke ever built talks that fast. That is the mechanical truth underneath the famous scream. A 3-cylinder test unit proved the idea in 1947, alongside a purpose-built scavenge blower rig-tested that same year. The first full engine ran in April of 1950, designed for 2,500 horsepower at 2,000 revolutions per minute. And that revolutions per minute number is the quiet miracle. A conventional big diesel of the day worked flat out at around 700 revolutions. The Deltic idled there and wound up to speeds no engine of its power class had any business reaching. With 18 cylinders firing in close succession, the power pulses blurred into one continuous ripping howl, the sound that would make the engine famous. In the Royal Navy's new dark-class fast patrol boats, the Deltic delivered exactly what the Admiralty had asked for in 1946: immense power from a package barely a fifth the weight of a conventional diesel of similar output, compact enough for an 80-foot hull, burning fuel that does not turn a hit into a fireball. It spread from there into minesweepers, where its lightweight and compact bulk suited small hulls hunting mines, and into other small warships at home and abroad, because export navies wanted it too. All told, more than 600 Deltics were built, including a 9-cylinder junior version, a single triangle of 3 banks of 3, inevitably nicknamed the Baby Deltic. And then the Deltic found a second, quieter naval calling: hunting mines. Minesweepers must be as magnetically invisible as possible, because magnetic mines listen for the signature of steel ships, so the Royal Navy built its sweepers with wooden hulls and filled them with machinery chosen for a low magnetic signature. The ton-class sweepers ran a pair of Deltic 18s for propulsion, plus a 9-cylinder Deltic just to generate power for the magnetic sweep gear itself. Decades later, the glass-hulled Hunt-class minehunters carried 3 9-cylinder Deltics apiece, and those boats kept their triangles in frontline Royal Navy service until a re-engining program that ran from 2010 to 2018. Sit with that for a moment. An engine designed in the 1940s was still doing serious naval work in the 2010s. At sea, the engine earned a reputation to match its looks. Crews said you did not so much hear a Deltic start as feel the air change, and dockyard workers learned to know when a dark boat was coming long before they could see it. The rail world even got a junior sibling, the half-sized turbocharged Baby Deltic, fitted to a small class of locomotives. So for a while, triangles were humming on both land and sea. And Napier, being Napier, could not leave well enough alone. One experimental compound version, with a turbine stage added to squeeze the exhaust as well, reached 5,500 horsepower, the most powerful piston engine the company ever made. But the Deltic's most famous life was not at sea at all. Now for the chapter almost nobody on this side of the Atlantic knows, the one where the Triangle joined the United States Navy. America had ended the Second World War with the most famous small combatants in history, the PT boats, and then let the type wither away. By the early 1960s, with a covert war brewing in Southeast Asia, the Navy suddenly needed fast attack boats again and had none, and no modern American design ready to build. So it did something almost unheard of. It went shopping abroad, and it bought Norwegian. Norway had developed a superb little 80-foot fast patrol boat, and the export version carried a name the American sailors took to instantly: the Nasty class. The first 2 boats, PTF-3 and PTF-4, were delivered from Norway in January of 1963, and the fleet grew to 20, with later hulls built under license in Annapolis, Maryland. Each boat displaced about 80 tons, carried a crew of 17, and mounted a 40mm gun aft, 20mm cannon, and a mortar forward. And each one was driven by 2 turbocharged Deltics, the most developed version of the Triangle yet, 3,100 horsepower apiece, 6,200 horsepower in an 80-foot wooden boat, good for 38 knots, well over 40 miles an hour. They drew less than 4 feet of water, which meant they could work close inshore and up into the shallows where nothing bigger could follow. They went to Vietnam, and they went into the shadows. The Nasty boats spent their war largely on covert operations along the North Vietnamese coast, running the kind of missions that did not make the newspapers, crewed by men who could not talk about where they had been. The type served the United States Navy from 1962 all the way to 1981, nearly 2 decades, and the official record lists them as the direct successors of the wartime PT boats. Think about that lineage, the most American small warships of them all, reborn with hearts that were British triangles built on a German idea. 5 of the boats survive in American museums today, including PTF-3 herself, preserved in Florida, and one more purely American footnote, because it is too good to leave out. When New York City built the Super Pumper in the 1960s, the giant land-going fireboat, often called the most powerful fire engine ever made, the machine chosen to drive its monster pump was, of course, a Napier Deltic. It survives too in a museum in Michigan. The Triangle got around. By the late 1950s, British Railways was desperate to kill steam on its flagship route, the East Coast Mainline from London King's Cross to Edinburgh, where the great streamlined steam Pacific still ruled. English Electric, which had owned Napier since 1942, and which gave the engine the tick at the end of its name, built a demonstrator locomotive around 2 Deltic engines, painted it a startling blue, and named it, in enormous letters along its flanks, simply Deltic. Finished in 1955, the prototype spent years touring the network, turning heads at every platform it passed, and settling the argument in the only way railwaymen respect, by keeping time, day after day, on the hardest diagrams they could give it. The pitch inside British Railways was brutal arithmetic. Two Deltic engines in one locomotive would deliver around 2/3 more power than the standard big diesels of the day, from a machine weighing a quarter less. The production version became the Class 55. 22 locomotives, built in 1961 and 62 at the Vulcan Foundry, each carrying two Deltic engines, rated for the railway at 1,650 horsepower apiece for a combined 3,300 horsepower, which made them, when introduced, the most powerful single-unit diesel locomotives in the world. And here is the statistic that tells you everything about what the triangle could do. Those 22 locomotives replaced 55 express steam Pacifics. 22 machines doing the work of 55, hauling the Flying Scotsman and the other great name trains, cutting London to Edinburgh to under 6 hours, and becoming the first diesels in Britain to run scheduled service at 100 miles an hour. The British, being the British, named them after racehorses and army regiments: St. Paddy, Tullyar, Royal Scots Grey, Gordon Highlander, thoroughbreds and soldiers, which is exactly what they were. For 20 years, if you rode the Morning Express out of King's Cross, your train was pulled by two triangles. And when a Deltic opened up out of a station, the scream carried across whole towns, a sound like canvas tearing inside a cathedral, rising and rising as 36 pistons went to work. Ask any British rail enthusiast of a certain age about that sound and watch their face change. It became, for a generation, simply the sound of speed. There was, of course, a price, and this audience would not trust the story without it. An engine this dense and this precise, with 3 crankshafts that must stay in perfect step through phasing gears, is not something a running shed fixes with a spanner. The tolerances on that gear train were measured in fractions of a millimeter, and the engine was packed so tight there was barely room to reach inside it. So the railway did something clever instead of fighting it. When a Deltic needed work, the whole engine came out through the roof and a fresh one went straight in, a change measured in hours rather than days, and the tired unit traveled back to the works to be rebuilt by the people who understood it. The locomotive kept earning while its heart was in the shop. It was submarine-style thinking applied to a railway, and it kept 22 impossibly complicated machines running the hardest schedules in Britain. It worked for 2 decades, through winters and summers, and 500,000 miles per locomotive, until the new Intercity 125 sets arrived to take the crack trains. The Class 55s were run down over 2 seasons, and by 1982 the last of them had gone, and the Triangle's reign on the Mainline was over. But this is one forgotten engine story with a gloriously loud ending, because the Deltic refused to die quietly. 6 of the 22 Class 55s were preserved, among them Royal Scots Grey herself, and the original blue prototype survives as well. And unlike most museum pieces, Deltics still run. Several of the preserved locomotives are certified for the national network, so on the right day, you can still stand on a modern British platform and have 1961 come howling through its speed. Enthusiasts travel the length of the country for it, and stand close enough to feel that scream in their chests, the way people make pilgrimages to hear a particular organ or a particular bell. The marine engines run too, in museum boats and preserve sweepers, and the devotion has gone one step further. A group of enthusiasts is currently building a brand new baby Deltic locomotive from scratch around a surviving 9-cylinder engine, resurrecting a class that vanished decades ago. People do not do that for ordinary machinery. They do it for love, and in this hobby, love is spelled with a sound. Somewhere in Britain, most weekends of the year, a triangle still lights off. So here is the sentence to carry out of this one. The opposed piston engine was a relay race across 3 nations. The Germans drew the idea, the Americans made it honest, and the British made it absolutely insane. This one came straight from the comments section, which has quietly become this channel's research department. After our Fairbanks Morse films, 2 of you independently brought up the Deltic and said it deserved its own video. You were right, and this video is the proof. Keep the requests coming, because the comment section keeps handing us better stories than any brainstorm ever could. So keep it going. If you ever rode behind a Class 55, served on the nasty boats or the minesweepers, turned wrenches on a Deltic anywhere, or just stood on a platform when one opened up. Tell us below what that sound actually did to you. And settle an argument for us in the comments, because the British readers will have opinions. Is the Deltic the greatest sounding diesel ever built? Or does an American two-stroke, a Detroit or a Fairbanks Morse, still hold that crown? If you are watching this in its first week, there is a hype button under this video. Tapping it costs you nothing, and it genuinely helps a small channel like this one get found. And then tap subscribe, because next we are going below decks on the fastest battleships ever built. And here at the Loud Era, the old iron always has one more story left to tell.